Oh God, I really hope that nope, that's not gonna work. Really hope, oh Jesus. It would not be a complete video if I didn't trip on something. I'm going to filter what I tell you because of my fear that you will treat me differently if I confide in you certain aspects of what I think. I myself, before I was ever diagnosed with anything ever, back when I thought I was quote unquote healthy, even though it sounds like I never was. But back when I thought I was healthy and I thought I was strong and I thought I was this and I thought I was that, I thought I was very independent and I thought that I was very reliable. I prided myself on these two things. So when I got sick, all of a sudden I wasn't reliable because there were some days I'd be like, I'm gonna do this, and then I would bail last minute because there was no way I was gonna be able to do it. And I thought I was independent, but all of a sudden I was put in a position where I couldn't walk, I couldn't lift, I couldn't go from the car to the store, I couldn't live on my own. There's so many things I couldn't do in the beginning. I was everything that I wasn't. I couldn't do anything. I was very dependent on a lot of people. And I was unreliable because there were days I was too sick, I was too weak, I was too pre-syncopal, I was too nauseous, I was too tired, I was too fatigued, whatever the case may be. My identity as a reliable, independent person all of a sudden was invalid. And so through that, there was a fear of other people, especially people like my coworkers and my boss and people whose opinion I held high. I was afraid if I told them too much, if I confided them in my weaknesses too much, if I told them all the things I couldn't do or all the things I was experiencing, that they would look at me different. But it wasn't just my coworkers and my bosses. It was also my friends. It was my family. It was my significant other. I didn't want these people to look at me differently because there was so much change going on. And all of a sudden, I didn't know what I was doing or who I was, or all of a sudden everything had been turned upside down. And I needed people to believe that I was the same person I was before. And there were some people, when I got diagnosed, who changed. Their opinion of me changed. I wasn't the same person that I was before in their eyes. I was broken, I was weak, I was sick. I was less of myself than I was before in their eyes. All of a sudden they were afraid to leave me alone for fear that I would pass out and I would hit my head. And that was very, very difficult. And there were some relationships that disintegrated because of that. My relationship with my significant other at the time when I got diagnosed disintegrated because that person no longer treated me like he did before. He was afraid of me. He was afraid of me becoming too sick to do something. He was afraid of me falling. He was afraid to leave me alone. He was afraid to be near me. He was afraid of so many things. All of a sudden, I was almost like a plague upon the earth, where there were certain people who ran away from me because I was difficult, because I was too hard to handle, because I was too stressful to be around. And I watched this happen, and there was nothing I could do about it. So we can isolate ourselves by putting on this brave face and saying, I can do that. Oh, I can't do that. I can do that. Yeah, totally. Because we don't want to disappoint you, because we don't want your opinion of us to change. And that opinion is so important to us, especially for people who aren't as confident in themselves, and they need that that good vibe from people, that encouragement to say, yeah, you're the same person, you can do this. And there were people in my life who aren't in my life anymore because they looked at me and they saw someone who was broken, someone who was weak, who was incapable of life, of living on their own, of working, of going to school, of ever making anything for themselves. And if you keep those people in your life, if you hear you can't enough times, you're going to start to believe it. The people who looked at me the way that they looked at me before and realized I was that same person were the people who encouraged me to get my life back, who encouraged me to embrace the new me, embrace the new direction my life was going in, embrace the fact that there was a lot of stuff that was out of my control. But those were the people that watched me go back to school, that watched me graduate with a degree, that watched me go back to work. Not the job I had planned on, but I was back to work, which is something my doctor told me I would never do. So, encouragement like that is a way to keep us from feeling isolated and feeling like we aren't capable. Because saying that we can't and looking at us like we're broken is the best way to ensure that we never succeed. Not to say that you need those people. Something I'm having to learn very slowly is that you cannot rely on other people to make you happy. You have to make yourself happy because people are unreliable. Me, as a person, I have to feel isolated because no one is going to understand unless they have gone through what I've gone through. That's not a lot of people in comparison. And it is not something I would ever wish upon anyone. But I've also met people who are chronically ill who want so desperately for someone to understand what it is that they're going through because they feel like if that person understands that they'll feel less alone. But the problem is unless that person, that family member, that friend, that significant other has gone through that same experience, they'll only be able to identify so much. So they will never be able to understand exactly what you have been through. And for people who desperately want someone to get it, they're left with frustration because they're not. No matter how hard they try, and they will try, they're not going to understand what it is you've gone through. So, the dichotomy, that polar of I want them to get it, I don't want them to get it. No matter which way you swing, it can be pretty isolating. I remember about 8 months after I was diagnosed with dysautonomia, I had this clear and unshakable thought. I had turned to my mother because at the time she was driving me because I wasn't allowed to drive because I had had all these syncopal episodes in the process of getting diagnosed. So I was completely dependent on my mother to drive me around. And I said, I realized being an adult is being afraid of everything. And at the time, I was. And I was convinced this was what adulthood was. It was being afraid of everything. I was afraid of the future because all of a sudden my future plans had changed. All of a sudden I was having to scramble and think, oh God, what am I going to do with the rest of my life now that I have all these restrictions? I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this. I was afraid of, how am I going to make money? I'm not working. What if I can never work again? How am I going to live my life? How am I going to be successful? How am I going to be happy? How am I going to feel fulfilled with my life, with my future? I was afraid of something as simple as, will I ever be able to, have a normal life? Am I ever going to be able to drive again? Am I ever going to live on my own ever again? Am I ever going to go back to school? There were so many unknowns. And there were so many things I was afraid of because all of a sudden, I'd come in to my young 20s. I'm 23, turning 24. But I was a college student. I had a plan. I'd been working on this plan hard. It had been my entire life going to school towards this goal. And then all of a sudden I'm being told I can't reach that goal. And my doctor says I may never work again. I may never go to school. And all of a sudden this view of who I was going to be, all the things I was going to do, all of a sudden that entire world came crashing down. And all of a sudden I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of who I had become. I hated who I was 8 months after being diagnosed. I was afraid of how afraid I was. I was pissed that I was so afraid of everything. I was angry because all of a sudden my plans had changed. And because I was angry, I was bitter. And I didn't like the fact that I was bitter. I'd always been really optimistic as a person. So all of a sudden I had hated the person that I had become. And I hated the fact that my plans had changed. And I was afraid of all of the unknowns in my life. Of my job, of my career, of my health. I was afraid of so many things. I was afraid I would never find anyone who would want to be friends with me because of all the issues I had. I was afraid I would never find a significant other who would deal with me because all of a sudden I thought I was too odd to like. And that's the mindset of someone who's newly diagnosed with practically any chronic illness. All of a sudden, the rules of which you have lived your life have changed, and your plans have changed, and you have changed. Your body isn't reliable. Your brain is wondering what the heck's going on. All of a sudden, you're trying to rebuild who you are and who you want to be and your goals in life. And I remember thinking to myself, being, this is it. This is adulthood. This is what it means to be an adult, is to be afraid of everything. And I don't believe that anymore. And it has required a lot of growth and a lot of life experience in the last 2 years to realize that adulthood is more than being afraid. Adulthood is being afraid and embracing the fear. Realizing you are terrified. You are afraid to move. You are afraid to breathe. You are afraid to make a decision. Realizing you're afraid. Realizing you're afraid to make a decision. Realizing you're afraid of everything. And going, you know what? I'm going to do it anyways. I'm afraid to talk to that guy. I'm going to do it. I am afraid to do this class. I'm going to do it. I may not be able to finish it, but I'm going to do it. Being an adult or being a developed human being, even if you are younger than an adult, is realizing you're afraid, embracing the fear, and moving forward. There are so many things to be afraid of. There are so many things that you can get out of life if you can get past being afraid. And it is hard, and it is a lot of work. And sometimes you have to have someone kick you in the butt to do it. And sometimes it takes a lot of self-talk. But if I had let myself say, I'm afraid to go back to school because I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid I'm going to have to drop out because of my health issues. I'm afraid to get a job because I'm afraid that I'm going to lose it because of my health issues. I'm afraid to go talk to that person because I'm afraid they're not going to like me because of all the stuff I've got going on. If I had let those fears control me, I would not be where I am.